Brian, is he on the line? I saw him pop in. Bazza.
I'm here, man.
Bazza. So Bazza is a new nickname that I gave to about 30 seconds after I met him online. And Brian is a corporate American turned global citizen. And he left his traditional corporate job in 2014 to start a boutique fitness concept in New York City, Throwback Fitness. He has since transitioned that into corporate in-person and virtual team building events. He's the creator of a Simple Man Guide, not simple like me, like simple, like, non-demanding lifestyle and minimalist kind of living. And it's a platform dedicated to inspiring others to question everything and live life on their own terms, which is a nice segue. By simplifying all aspects of life, starting with wellness, simplifying his own life has afforded him the opportunity to travel the world in search of the best workout spots. I am incredibly jealous of this man's Instagram profile. Right, all I could post is my front yard, my driveway, and the backyard for the last 6 months. So I'm jealous of him. And he's used as inspiration to write his latest book, The Ultimate Outdoor Workout Guide. I'd love to welcome Brian Gallagher as our last speaker for the 2020 immersion. Give a big applause for Bazza.
Hey guys, how is everyone doing? I want to thank Gaza. That was I realized that all Australians that I've met add a ZZA to the end of just about every name that they have for their friends. All my Aussie buddies in New York, where I'm from, all like to add that ZZA to the end of their name. So that was my way to Aussie up Gary's name for me. I want to thank him. He reached out, or we connected through Nigel Walton from Backable. I met Tim and his wife Alana in Byron Bay over the summer as part of a kind of travel lifestyle that I've taken on in the past year or so. And he connected Gary and I and hit it off. And he's like, "Hey, I'd like to have you come chat with everybody." So I'm honored to be here. I'm in Amsterdam, so I may not be able to live up to that handsome moniker he gave me. It's 4 a.m. right now. I just woke up about 45 minutes ago. So it's still dark here and quiet. I also wanted to give a quick shout. I don't think he's on, but Craig Ballantyne. It was nice to, I posted this yesterday, I shared this yesterday. I had a little moment because Craig was a guy that I've always admired kind of growing up, and he was kind of had a fitness background as well. And that's kind of where I ended up going after kind of leading what I would call like a traditional kind of societal fed lifestyle, like go to college, get good grades, get a job, take that job, live it and work it for the next 30 or 40 years and then retire. And that's where you finally get to do what you want to do. But what I've kind of figured out for myself as I was going that path and spent a bunch of time and money on that path was just that it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't, it was what everyone made us feel like we were supposed to do. But it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I didn't really spend that time at, say, 17 or 18 when it was time to go to college to figure out exactly what I wanted to do, which I wish I did more of. No regrets on the path that I had actually chosen, but who's to say what would have changed if I had figured out that I really liked fitness at the age of 18 and wanted to pursue that as a career, but I didn't know that was an option necessarily because of all these things that we are fed and that we maybe perpetuate with people that are younger now. And it is something I'm trying to actually help younger folks realize that there are other ways to do this and they don't have to follow this necessarily societal script that we've all been given. So I don't know I don't know everyone's background here, and I want to make this as useful as possible for everyone. So please feel free to stop me and wherever you would like to dig in and go into more detail. Or is everyone here studio owners or gym owners? Is that the general like consensus here? So I mean, I ran a studio. Okay, I ran a studio for a number of years. I guess let me start with that. Like I had a story that I wanted to run through, but let me go right to the studio stuff because I think that might be more helpful in what we've actually done to transition kind of away from that. And we actually did it before coronavirus, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm really feeling the pain of all my friends that have gyms and studios, and the unknowns that are around, that are surrounding gyms and studios in New York, where I had my studio for 3 years or 4 years. They still are uncertain as to when they're allowed to open. Every other gym has opened, but studios were not allowed for the longest time, to the point where now studio owners were kind of banding together to kind of fight the mayor and the governor when they could, and figuring out when they can open studios again. So after I had worked in the corporate world for 11 years, I was in investment banking, I was in accounting for Johnson and Johnson, and I started to get those thoughts in my head that I didn't want to stay working in that corporate life. I had a friend who just happened to, he was a former colleague. He happened to approach me about running a fitness studio, and I was like, oh man, this is great. This is my opportunity to kind of break out of this corporate life. I had spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how to start my own business. And I always knew that I wanted to work for myself, and I didn't want to be in this corporate realm anymore. So I had put into action a plan to save a bunch of money to kind of give me a little more comfort into jumping into a more a riskier venture. You know, like when you're working in the corporate world, the way I looked at it was, as long as I didn't screw up, I was getting money in my bank account each week. And when you run a business, as you guys all know, if it's all business owners here, I mean, there's a lot more pressure and a lot more emotional kind of roller coastering, right? Where I describe the corporate life as just pretty steady, and as long as you don't mess up, you get paid. But when we got to the studio life, it was a lot more different, and I kind of had unknowingly set myself up to take that risk, being comfortable financially. And I did that by kind of adopting this simple lifestyle, probably a few years before I'd actually left the corporate world. So we opened our studio up. We had to sign a personal guarantee. So meaning if anything happened, the landlord was under no responsibility to go and remarket the studio or the space himself. So it was a huge risk for us. It was several $100,000 that was hanging our heads, for the lease for our studio, which was 1,200 square feet, and we paid almost $10,000 a month when we left. I don't know where you guys are in terms of what your rents are, but it caused a lot of heartache for me and my business partner when we first signed on here. So when we ran the studio for several years, and we saw that the industry in New York was quite challenging. We had started around the same time that ClassPass had come on board. I don't know how ClassPass affects any of you guys in any way, or did in any way, prior to all this. And this is all pre-pandemic. So I'm sure so many things have changed, and things that I'm unaware of because I no longer have a studio. But I'm sure, but when those guys came on board, that really kind of changed the game for everyone. And what happened was, they were funding people to open studios, so there was a ton of supply with classes. Nobody was willing to kind of commit to one studio or the other, because they could pay $100 a month when this thing first started and access every single studio in the city, up to 3 times a month. So there was no need for them to commit to one place. So what we started to see was that there was a ton of supply, and there was very little like sticky demand. So ClassPass's whole pitch was, hey, we're going to allow people to see your studio. They can then come to you for a few visits a month and then commit to you guys and come to you directly. But that never happened. So what we saw was that attendance of our classes was increasing as revenue was declining, because you couldn't charge any more money, because as soon as you charge money, they would cut from you and go to ClassPass because it was much cheaper. So we ended up walking away from the studio, but we did a couple things to help kind of bolster us during having the studio, which we've then used to carry on our business in the meantime, which we are still running, but without any brick and mortar expenses. So two things that may be of interest for you guys that have studios that are looking for additional ways to supplement revenue. And this is not where I was planning to take this whole talk, but we can do that because I feel just trying to read what you guys would have the most interest in, and I think it would be this. So what we do now, we do Zoom events like this, but we call them virtual recess. So our concept, Throwback Fitness, which we started in 2014, was based on the idea of making workout fun for everyone. My business partner and I used to work out all the time together, and we found that we always, when we made it competitive, um, it was much more fun. It was much more enjoyable. We looked forward to it, and we found. I mean, a lot of people that I know will work out because they feel they have to. I'm sure none of us are like that. We're all in the gym space. We've went into that space for a reason because we have a passion for fitness. But many people don't have that. So trying to make working out fun for them was our main goal. So what we did, we made all the workouts based on they were based on games. So we one weekend when we started off, we rented space from somebody else. So we were subletting a studio space in a personal training studio. And my business partner, all the credit to him, he had such a genius idea. So we had everybody working out in these individual stations, and he had an idea that to try to gamify it. So he made it into a game of makeshift basketball. So what he did was, we had these two trash cans in the studio. We had a bunch of tennis balls. He's like, the object of this is we're going to split the class into two teams, and the team with the most points at the end of the game will be the winner. And here's how you earn a point. So you run through this circuit, and it was out of 25 or 30 body weight reps of something, say 10 push-ups, 10 squats, 10 sit-ups. So after they do that circuit, they can run over to the trash can, grab a tennis ball, stand behind the free throw line, and try to make it in the bucket. And if they make it in the bucket, they get a point. Now, what he noticed, or what we noticed instantly, was that the energy in the room skyrocketed. Everyone's working out together instead of in their own individual silos. So um, the camaraderie and the competition really, it did two things. It made people in the room a lot more excited to work out, and they don't even know that they're getting better results because they're pushing themselves to work harder. We call it like the Miyagi effect. You know, we were having them do something they didn't know they were doing, and they were getting better benefits from it. So we built our whole concept on that. But after the studio, we decided to try to certify coaches to teach our program. And then the other one, what we really focus on now, is doing corporate private events. So we used to do these all in person outside. So, and we would do them for any group size. So we literally had groups as small as 10 people. And our largest event was actually 4 ClassPass corporate offices. We did an event for 350 people where they rented out a university football stadium, and we coached a giant field day there. We actually called those corporate field days. So what we would do was organize the group into teams. As say the group was 80 people, we'd organize it into 4 or 8 teams. We'd run them through a bunch of events that are all coached. So we'd have it on, say, a football field or a soccer field or rugby field or Aussie rules field, whatever you guys want to call it. So we'd organize a series of events. We'd outsource the hiring of coach, or we'd outsource the coaching. So we'd hire a bunch of coaches. If the events were in New York, me or my business partner Ryan would run them, but we've started to run them in different cities where we basically subcontract to other fitness coaches. So I did an event in Montana, and I hired 3 spinning studio instructors to help me run the event. It takes a couple hours. It takes probably an hour to get them up to speed on what they're supposed to do to help You're basically refereeing these games. So we trained them to do that, and that was a very beneficial, or very like lucrative part of our business, because there was no expenses related to that, and we were able to do that after we moved out of the studio. So we found that to be super helpful for us, and now we are still doing that. But since the pandemic has hit, we have had to alter that a little bit, and and to kind of keep us going while everyone is afraid to do group events. So no one wants to be outside with a group of 100 or 200 people, and companies don't want to take that risk at this point. So what we've done now is we've converted to a virtual recess, and we're running events for groups very similar to this, but we have all of these kind of digital or virtual games that we've made up now that we can run for companies, and that we are actively marketing to companies, and we're actively hiring coaches to run those events as well. And if that's something that you guys are interested in, happy to set you up and kind of talk there. But I wanted to throw that out there first, if that was of more interest in you, but I can walk through kind of how I ended up where I am now, more so separate from the business. But if you guys have any questions on the studio stuff, feel free to message me at any point. My Instagram, which I saw Gary put up there, is Simple Man Guide. That's probably the best spot to reach me, or by email, brian@simplemanguide.com. Our studio handle, which you can also check out on Instagram, is Throwback Fit. And that's where you can see what the events that we do now. And I see, and if you guys have, so can you guys fill me in? I'm unaware if somebody wants to just put it in the chat, what is the state of things now are you guys all in Melbourne? Are you all over Australia? I don't know much about where you guys are, so it would be helpful for me. And if you're all in Australia, let me know the state of the studios and the gyms, and I can be of more help with you guys, and to kind of like helping you get, everything's open. Okay. So yeah, so there's a bunch of things that we do, I think, that may be of interest for you guys to run in your studios. I mean, we have a program online that we've created, that anyone is open to take. We created a teachable course, that we honestly don't focus on as much anymore, because the majority of our business now is these virtual events and these corporate events. But the course on Teachable is still up and running, and has all of our games and everything we've done in terms of programming, what we did when we had our studio open. And if it's something that would be of interest to you guys, yes, absolutely reach out to me, because I would love to get it to you guys. We are not running it anymore in a studio, so I would be super excited to have other people run it. So please feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to set you up there. But if that's, it just seems like that's the demographic here is all gym owners. So I'm happy to continue talking about that. Or if you guys have questions, just put them in the chat. I'm happy to go into more detail there, but that's great. I'm super excited for you guys that everything is open. I mean, must be a relief. Can you fill me in on what new restrictions have been in that time also? Like, is there capacity restrictions? Are you guys not allowed to have as much as you were before, or is everything basically back to normal now?
So Brian, just to fill you in, so Victoria, which is probably the hardest lockdown state for longest, has just been reopened pretty much, which Terry is excited about, and everyone else is pretty excited about. Adelaide had a brief stint. Queensland, a lot of Queensland was untouched, but the way that they're operating their businesses have had to change. We'd definitely like to get that link to that Teachable course. I think you hit a few notes in terms of the gamifying of the business, which would be fantastic. But I'd also like to, if I can switch tangents, I really
Sure.
One of the things that really resonated to me when I first heard you speak was the decision to live life on your terms, like the decision to step away from that safe paycheck, step into your business, and then when your business started to, not go the way that you needed it to, and it didn't, and more so, it didn't fit what you wanted out of your life right now. The ability to make that decision and find the solutions to be able to live life on your terms is that I'm also curious about hearing, and that journey of where it got you to, finding yourself in Amsterdam when 2 weeks ago you were in Italy. And
yeah. Yeah, I've been all over. So Gaz, I will definitely run through that. So I'll take it back to when I was in that corporate world. I reached a point when I became tired of trading. The way I looked at it was trading time for money. I was working a salary job, a well-paying job, so it allowed me to kind of save a lot of money as I was living in New York. But there are other things that I did on that path that allowed me to save money as well. That just that allow me to kind of do what I am doing now. So when I went to so it was basically one trip that kind of altered my mindset and my lifestyle. So in 2010, a bunch of my friends were going to they emailed me, they were going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. So my buddy emailed me, and as soon as I saw the email, I was like, sometimes you get something like that and it's a year ahead. You're like, yeah, I'm in. Yeah, forget it. I'm in. I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to get there. I'm in. And when I saw that, I was like, something in me said that I had to do that. So I told him immediately that I was in. No, there was no second guessing that. I wasn't debating with myself. I went on the trip, and it completely changed. It changed my life, and I'll tell you how. So it was a 2.5 week trip. We went to Kilimanjaro, and then we went to Zanzibar after, to kind of decompress after spending 8 days on the mountain. But what that trip did for me, that kind of set me off on a different path, was I got home and I realized that I just had the best 2.5 weeks possibly of my life at that time. And I did it with only a backpack on my back and just a bunch of friends and in nature, and had whatever I needed was on me, and everything else seemed to be extraneous at that point. So I walked back into my apartment. I lived in New York City at the time, and I instantly felt overwhelmed with everything that I owned. Everything that was in my apartment that I had was just, I didn't need it anymore. Something in my head went off, and I just went on this tangent. I went on this tear and got rid of basically everything in my apartment that didn't seem useful to me at the time. Furniture, clothes, things in my kitchen, my bathroom, like everything, to the point where people came in my apartment. They're like, "Did you just move in here?" I was like, "No, I just did a little cleaning. I just had too much stuff that I had. I just felt so cluttered and so weighed down." And after I went through that exercise, it was kind of eye opening, where I was at a point now where I was debt free. I had a nice savings cushion, and the wheels were in motion, that I could continue on this path, saving, not spending, not owning a bunch of stuff. And that would translate into more freedom and independence for me. So after getting rid of all my things, I started to look at money in terms of time. So I figured out what my monthly expenses were at that point, and that was a number that I kept in my head. That if I had this, whatever amount of money I had in my bank, was that many months of freedom that I could allow myself to have away from a corporate job. So after I had a nice cushion saved, I was like, man, I really don't need this job. I'm really not spending that much money. I was in a 2 bedroom apartment that I moved into when I moved to New York when I was 25. And despite the fact that I was doing well at my job and progressing nicely in my career, salary increases came with that. But what was most important, and probably the biggest decision, one of the biggest decisions that that's been the most impactful for me throughout my years, has been that I chose to stay in that 2 bedroom apartment with a roommate the entire time I was working as an investment banker. And I went through the mental exercises many times to decide if I wanted to buy an apartment, if I wanted to upgrade my apartment, if I wanted to rent something bigger, if I wanted to live by myself, just a bunch of different things. And that I kept thinking of, that I could have used my salary more effectively, I guess. And I consider now just like ratcheting up my lifestyle, which I chose not to do. And that afforded me the time to do what I wanted and not have to work a corporate job anymore. And the other thing it did was free up cash for me to make other investments that would allow me to kind of build my nest egg, and allow me to walk away from a corporate job without the feeling of that I had anything that I had to stay for. So I had no debt. I had nothing that I had to stay in New York for. I had complete and utter freedom after we opened the studio, or after we closed the studio. So the studio kept me in New York for 3 years. But once we closed the studio and I had nothing keeping me in New York, that's when I started to think like, wow, I don't really have to be here. We can run these virtual events from anywhere. We were hiring coaches to run our events for us. So that really got me thinking that I could be anywhere and do what I wanted to do, and kind of walk away from all this, all the things that I had been taught that were kind of ingrained in me since I was a kid. And I touched on those earlier, which is like, go to school, get good grades, get into a good college, work your job, stay there until you're 65 and you retire, and then you have the time to do what you really want to do. But as I thought about that, it didn't make sense to me. It's like I'm waiting around till 65, which is guaranteed to no one, and doing the things that I like to do, being active, hiking, swimming, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I didn't want to wait until I was 65 to see if I could still do that stuff then. It was like, I need to do this now. And so when I was able to kind of figure out that I had enough money to go and do what I wanted, as long as I didn't live it as a vacation lifestyle. So what I'm doing now, I mean, the last year or so, I've been out of the United States. I visited a bunch of countries, and I kind of picked spots. Some of them were picked honestly because of my girlfriend. So I'm in Amsterdam now because my girlfriend just got a job there. We were living in Milan. I spent the first lockdown in Milan, where my girlfriend lives. But in between those times, it's where I was in Ecuador. I was in England. I was in Italy. I was in Australia. I was in New Zealand. I met Tim in Byron Bay over the summer. And once the thing that I realized was that if you're able to treat it as a lifestyle and not necessarily as a vacation, I think people think like you need to be absolutely filthy rich to do that, and you don't. And there's a couple things in my mind about mindset that I've changed over the past year or so, and it's honestly a thing that I still struggle with, but I'm working to kind of flip the perception in my head that we've been fed. That I keep saying we, it's just the general lifestyle path that is ingrained in the United States. I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia, but it's very strong funneling into the same system. So and it's hard to break. And the thing that I struggle with honestly is like, am I spending my years the right way, trying to amass this bunch of money that I can then use when I'm 60? Or do I need to have something that gets me through? Do I need to have something now, as much now that I need to get me through the rest of my life? And the answer is no. And the reason I say that is because I'm not actually looking to retire. I've considered it retiring from work that I don't want to do. So the money I have now, or the money that I need to have now, I look at as I just need the money to get me to my next work venture that I want to pursue. So now I don't have to do work that I don't like. I didn't hate my corporate job. I just didn't love it. It wasn't what made me want to wake up every day and be excited. I had to go somewhere where somebody else was telling me I had to go. I had to wear what they wanted me to wear. I had to talk like they wanted me to talk. I just didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do my own thing and live my own life. We get one shot at this, and I don't want to spend my best, healthiest, fittest years sitting behind a desk. And it seems like you guys are already on that kind of path. You're not. No one is anyone here in corporate life, or are we all gym owners?
You've got people who have made the career change, and I think that part resonates definitely with a lot of people, and I've been down that path. What I found was, what's interesting about the way that you constructed your lifestyle is that if someone were to purely look at your Instagram account and say, God, this guy is like, he's everywhere. He's England, he's Australia, he's Milan, and you have this perception of opulence, right? And like, how is that even possible? And the thing I really like about what you just said is that the way that you saw it was not a vacation. You still work, you just work in different locations, and you make decisions that align with that. It's interesting what you were talking about in terms of running your business and still working, is because there is nothing stopping someone with a physical facility of doing the same thing as you are, provided
Yeah.
they have built their business so that it isn't dependent on them to be there all the time. Tim talked about this. Luca talked about this, who owns a gym in Seattle. And it's the same for every single person in this virtual room, is that the lifestyle that you have is not unachievable.
It's definitely not. And I'm doing my best now to kind of help people understand that and help people figure out if that's something that they want to do. And I think when I first got into kind of my own personal brand, the Simple Man Guy brand, that was more based on fitness. And it was born out of, honestly, I had a couple friends that asked me like, I'm 40, I just turned 40 this year. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, in my middle 30s, a lot of my friends were like slowly gaining that 1 or 2 pounds a year since the end of college. And then they wake up one day and they're like, shit, I'm like 15 to 20 pounds overweight. How did I get here? And I had a bunch of friends ask me like, "Hey, what would you do? If, like, how do you stay?" I was in good shape. I was always into fitness, and a lot of friends had asked me what I do, or what I eat, how I work out. So after enough friends have asked me, I was like, "Man, there's probably people that could use help doing this. If I were to do this and I needed to lose 15 pounds, what would I do?" So I put together a book, and I had to think of a name, and this simple kind of moniker was already brewing in my head because I basically had no things. I had an apartment that was pretty empty, and I read this one article a few years ago. If any of you guys have ever heard of James Altucher, if you haven't, he's got some really good stuff to read. He's got a great blog. He's got a great book, which really helped me kind of alter my mindset as well. It's called Choose Yourself. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend it. But anyway, what caught my attention about him was that it was the New York Times article that said this guy had only a backpack worth of things. And I was like, wow, I think that's something achievable, that I think I could strive for. So that ended up, after I like got rid of all my things and I decided to leave New York, I got rid of my furniture. I got rid of like my bed, my table, my desk, all my stuff. It was all gone. I had a couple boxes of things, and I had a backpack, and I left for Ecuador in November, and that kind of set me off on my first year of kind of traveling. And now I realize that, like, okay, I basically have that. I'm just the guy now with the backpack. I do have a box of things in my parents' house, so I'm not quite as simple, but I've gotten down to that where I'm like, now I'm just a backpack, and now I can move from any city I want to move to. Over the summer, when I was not before I had met my girlfriend and lived with my girlfriend, I could go anywhere that I chose, and I did that. That's how I ended up in Australia and New Zealand. I have a good friend from Melbourne, that's good friends with Tim. So I met him in New Zealand, and we just set off and went where we wanted to go. Um, but having the kind of simple mindset and the detachment, the main thing for me that was very important was the detachment from consumerism. So the idea that I had to spend all my money on things, breaking away from that was life changing, honestly, because it's a hard thing to do. I mean, we are constantly fed, subliminally, all these things that we need to buy, we need to keep up with people, and that those thoughts, once they get in your head, or they can set you on that path where you're almost in like a hamster wheel, right? It's just a never ending chase for things. And I was listening to this podcast the other day, which was very interesting. Another guy, if you haven't come across, um, I would highly recommend listening to his stuff as well. His name is Derek Sivers, Derek. His last name is Sivers, Sivers. And what he said in a podcast, on the Knowledge Project podcast, which I found fascinating, was like, well, what would you do if you had $1 million right now? How would that change your life? And I thought about it, and I was like, I feel like I finally made that detachment from consumerism, when the answer to that question for me was I probably wouldn't do that much different. I mean, I might, I might be willing to expand a bit on my living expenses now, but I keep things pretty simple for a reason, and allows me the freedom to kind of do what I want and not feel like I'm chained to a job that I don't want to do. So keeping the expenses low for me is fun, but an extra $100 million, I don't know that it would change too much for me. I'm kind of doing what I want to do. I'm working on what I want to work on. The things that I like to do are free. I like to read. I like to write. I like to go outside. I like to hike. I like to run. I like to swim. All those things I can do anywhere now, if I'm smart with how I spend my money, and I'm able to detach my mind and my happiness from the accumulation of things. And I think that was a very important kind of eye-opening realization for me, that you could go anywhere, do anything you want, as long as you can break away from that mentality that comparing yourself to others and having things that other people have and feeling like you have to be at a certain point in your life at a certain time. I mean, you don't really need to do any of that. These are all kind of ideas um, that we've kind of put on ourselves. And I don't know anyone's situation here, but this works for me because I mean, I'm 40, I'm single, I have no kids. And I don't have a brick and mortar business anymore where I need to be somewhere. But there are ways to kind of run that brick and mortar where you don't have to be there. And if that's something that's of interest to you, I would highly recommend kind of figuring out what the most helpful thing for me was tracking my expenses when I first decided that I wanted to start um, living elsewhere. Knowing what I spend on a monthly basis and what I need to spend on a monthly basis was critical because then it allows me to figure out how much time I have. I'm constantly converting things to time in my head. And once you get that number of your monthly expenses and whatever that number is, you're able to do that. So say your monthly expenses are $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. You can then translate into, even if you're spending on something, I looked at it as like, if I'm going to upgrade my apartment from my New York rent, which was $1,800, if I'm going to go get my own place at $3,000, I mean, that's $1,200 a month extra. That's $15,000 a year. That's 5 more months that I have to work. That's 5 months that I don't have to work if I don't spend the money. If I can just save that money, knowing what you do with your money on the monthly basis is very crucial. Because a lot of people, and I was guilty too, it's just like money comes into your account, it runs out of your account without you really seeing where it's going. And once you can take the time, and I have things that I've done, like apps that I've used and spreadsheets that I've built that like help me do that. And I'm happy to share any of those with any of you guys. I've written some stuff on that too, but that was game changing. That was completely game changing. Oh, I just realized that's the name of the immersion too, right? This is a game changing idea for me. It was like this when I realized that, and I could convert the time to money and figure out how much time I could stay away from corporate life. I mean, that was that set me up to kind of help me think in a different way. And that's really what it's about, just kind of thinking in a different way. And I lead with the fitness part, because that's what I was passionate about, but it really is the foundation for a lot of the things that I'm sure you guys have talked about this weekend, and even what I'm talking about. Because what it did for me, beside from the physical, was the mental strength, the confidence, the ability to do things on your own and take risks without listening to what other people are going to say. And I feel a lot of people that are trying to keep you on that same path are just people that are probably unhappy with their own path. And the fitness was something that helped instill in me the confidence to kind of do what I want, realize that I don't have to listen to anybody else. And without that foundation that the fitness provides, it makes it a lot difficult to do everything else. That is the base. And if that is not working well for you or for anyone, it makes all this other stuff hard, because when you're working for yourself, and as you guys all know, the motivation comes from other places, right? A lot of it has to come from you, especially if you're running a business completely by yourself. The motivation comes from you. So if you are, and I noticed this for me, and I'm sure some of you guys would notice that too, as you're all into wellness. I noticed that if I take a couple days and I'm eating less than ideal foods, it kind of starts a pretty bad cycle of inactivity, lack of motivation, lack of productivity. So as soon as I noticed that, a couple years ago, it just, your mind will kind of feed into that for you. So you start eating junk food and you have a couple days where you haven't really eaten anything that's beneficial for you. It makes you want to not work out. It makes you lazier, and that just makes you want to continue that cycle. So that's why I put wellness at the base, because it really, aside from the physical, the mental aspects the mental benefits that it provides really allows you to do all these other things. And if someone that lacks the confidence will no way take that risk of doing their own thing. They will be very afraid to leave that comfort zone and try something, because it's uncomfortable. I mean, moving to, like, for instance, moving to a new country where you don't speak the language and you want to try to live there. I mean, that's a very uncomfortable feeling at first when you walk outside and you realize you don't know what anyone what anyone is saying. Um, But if I were to stay at home and eat junk food and not work out, and that cycle would just perpetuate, and that would make everything else almost impossible to do. So that's the reason I lead with that. But I want to get into helping other people realize that, like, hey, there are paths, other paths that you can take, and this is your life to do with what you want. There are no rules. The only rules that we put on ourselves are the ones that we are kind of fed from childhood, and we can absolutely break away from those. I'm sorry, I'm looking at all these chat things now. I mean, I love seeing this, people that left corporate for fitness at 52. I mean, kudos to you. That is amazing. I love seeing that. And it takes a lot of balls. It takes a lot of balls. And I know the feeling, and I'm very, it makes me smile to see other people doing the same, because a lot of people that I talk to, friends, family, a lot of them work jobs that they don't like. And when you think about that, you think about how much of your time you are actually spending if you're working a job you don't like. If you realize how much of your time you are spending doing something that is not what you want to do, I mean, that's a lot of time to let slip through your fingers if you're doing that for 20, 30, 40 years. And that, I just couldn't, that to me was more uncomfortable, than taking a risk and doing something that I felt that I wanted to do. It's the risk, and the risk of regret, like not trying something. Like if I had been lacking confidence and my buddy had said, "Hey, let's leave our jobs and start the studio," there's no way I would have done that. And I still believe that if I hadn't had that, I would still be sitting at that desk and seeing the guys, and being one of the guys that I saw when I was 30. And I looked ahead and on the guys on my path. So at 30 years old, I'm looking at the guys that are 40, and I'm already thinking to myself, like, I don't want that to be me. Not that there was anything wrong with what they were doing or how they were living. It just wasn't what I wanted. And being able to decide to pull the trigger and do what I wanted I see it takes boobs, balls, and all. Christy, I see, I like your message. So whatever you want to consider it, yeah, it takes guts. If we want to make it unisex, takes guts. But yeah, so that's why I lead with the fitness. But there are things beyond that you could do that could kind of set you on that path. To doing what you want to do. Yeah, I'm Gary or Gaza. Totally. Yeah. If you guys want to have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer those instead of just talking the whole time. Yeah, I want to make this interactive and helpful for you guys.
That's all. It's all. I really like that. The last point you made about doing jobs that you don't like, right? As business owners, often we resign ourselves to doing the stuff in the business that we don't like and don't necessarily do. We went through a quadrant yesterday about, identifying what we like, what we're great at, what we don't like so much, what we're not so great at, and
yeah,
automating,
giving away some.
Yeah, giving it away and relegating those responsibilities. But I'd really love to open up for any questions and comments and insights that people would like to draw from with you, because the mindset is outstanding in terms of living life on your terms. And I'd really like people to be able to pick your brains as we wrap up a full year of immersions, a pretty demanding year. It's easy to feel like everything has been taken away from you. So questions, folks, speak up. Nothing. Dan, how about you?
I have one.
Oh,
yeah, shoot.
How many events do you do, and how do you manage your work and around your travel?
So we have, my business partner handles most of our events now. So my job at this point, or what I would consider my work at this point, is working on my personal brand, and getting that up and running has been my priority at this point. And honestly, I'm not at a point yet where it's supporting my lifestyle, which is why the savings were crucial for me, and why I consider to be like, my savings doesn't have to get me through my entire life. My savings has to get me to my next project. But the benefit of that is that now I'm working on something that I want to do. And when I'm working on something I want to do, it's allowed me to keep motivation while traveling and while doing this stuff. But while we're doing the events, why I'm traveling around, we are hiring coaches. So we charge what we charge for the events. We're able to go and outsource the coaching to other people. We have no brick and mortar expenses. So our only expenses now are hiring other coaches. And whatever marketing we do, a lot of it is email based campaigning. We run ads on Facebook and I think we were running Yelp ads for a bit, but have stopped. But in terms of what we have to do, we were able to teach people how to run it, and then we are just outsourcing the coaching. So it's not anything where we have to be in a certain area and we have to spend a certain dedicated amount of time each day doing the marketing. Yes, but for the events, we can be anywhere now that they are all virtual for the time being. When they turn back to physical, we will still be hiring coaches in different regions on a needed basis. So if we have an event in, say, California, we'll go to fitness studios there, we'll find coaches, we'll hire them, and we'll run the events that way. But we've kind of created the program to kind of help onboard people, teach them how to run the events so we can kind of extract ourselves.
Perfect. When you're running an event like that, Brian, do you sell it first and then resource it with staff afterwards?
Yes. So we do a lot. Some of our requests are inbound. So we will get email requests through our website. And we just did one the last one we had before all this closed down we had one in LA, we had one in DC. But they actually didn't even happen because we got requests for them like end of February, and then March we were New York was in lockdown and LA was in lockdown. So we had to cancel the events. But we find them first and we go ahead and find the coaches after that. So that's basically how we decided to run our business anyway. You take the sale and then you figure out how to make it work afterwards. Like it's like take your big bite and then chew as fast as you can. And we found it to be the better way to do it. And we always came up with solutions as to how to make it work. I mean, we never once have we decided that we were going to do something and then we were like, oh shit, what do we do? You figure it out. It's just part of being a business owner. A lot of being a business owner is having a problem come into your hands and then figuring out how to solve it. So this is no different here.
It gives you speed of execution as well, because how often have you built a program, you thought it was perfect, you go, everyone's going to go nuts for this, and then no one's bought it, right?
And no one buys it. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that helped us too. And I'll just hint briefly on this was if you haven't read Eric V's book, Lean Startup. That was another one that we really enjoyed. And it talks exactly what you just talked about, Gary, and what we're talking about now. It's kind of selling what you are selling first. Like, don't go build this product with all these bells and whistles. Build what you need to get the product out. And then the market will tell you what you need to add to it. You end up wasting a lot of time and resources if you go build this really pretty thing and then you realize that nobody wants it or nobody wants all the extra benefits that you added onto it. If you have an idea for something, get it out there as soon as you can with what he calls in the book, the minimally viable product, the MVP. Get the product out there. The market will tell you what else it wants on it. And that's where you spend your time. That's your guide. You know, here's the market wants this, then you spend your time doing that instead of spending your time what you think is perfect, because rarely is. It rarely ends up being what you want it to be.
Some logistical questions. When you're traveling, how much do you allow for, just out of curiosity? And
expenses?
What do your expenses consist of?
So my expenses now mainly are rent, and I'm usually renting Airbnbs because they're short term. I will cook a lot of stuff in my apartment. So a large expense, if you're traveling, if you allow it to be, is eating out and drinking. I rarely drink because I feel it more now. I'm 40. It just doesn't feel as good. So I just don't do it as much anymore. And that's a big expense when you're out to eat. So I usually allow myself, and I base this off of my New York expenses. So it may be artificially inflated, but I try to keep my accommodation expenses in probably the $60 to $75 range per night. If I go any higher than that, then it turns into like vacation mode where you don't want to spend that much, and it ends up just shortening the amount of time that you feel comfortable staying in any certain place if it's expensive. So I usually give myself, it's usually $3,000 to $4,000 a month is what I try to target as my expense number when I'm out. And again, I'm very simple. Like if I'm by myself, like, I'm eating very simple foods. I'm cooking for myself. I'll go out a couple times a week. But it's the accommodations that are really the biggest slug of expenses. And most of the stuff, like I mentioned earlier, most of the stuff that I love to do in these places is free. And I see I'm looking at questions here too. It doesn't include flights because I haven't, it depends where I'm going. I haven't flown since returning from Australia in February. Everything else I've done has been by train or by bus at this point, or ferry. I actually went from Croatia to Italy on an overnight ferry for the first time. And that was great because it was, I think it was $100, and that was my transportation and my accommodations for that night. So that night was a total score. It was like super cheap and easy to do. So trying to find out ways to move around. Cause now I think of it as I'm time rich now. It's like, if it takes me 10 hours to train somewhere and it costs me half the price of flying, I don't have to be anywhere at any certain time. So, I'm fine taking more time to get somewhere and spending less money at this point. That's just my mindset now. And it helps. Anything to help extend the amount of time that I can do this is good for me. I think of it as I'm time rich now.
Nice. When you step out of your comfort zone, how do you know when to pull back because you have created too much pressure by stepping outside? How do you know when you've stepped too far out of your comfort zone?
In terms of what do you feel that you've maybe taken on more than you can take, like opening a business or like taking a risk, like a giant expense risk? Like, it's tough. It's a tough question to answer without knowing what exactly is the thing that would be holding you back. I mean, if you feel
taken on in terms of, I would say work and just responsibilities would be, and maybe taken on too much because of your ambition and your drive and your passion to helping people.
I think if you are managing your time and you still feel overwhelmed, then there's probably two things, right? You took on too much, yes, or you can probably get someone to help you do that, right? There's a lot of things that, think about what you're doing throughout your day and how many of those tasks can either be eliminated or delegated to someone else. Yeah, it might cost you a little money to have someone else do it for you, but there are plenty of resources available to have those things done on a fairly cheap basis, and ways to get creative with that. And that's kind of the fun part too, right? Is like figuring out how to do these things. It's tough to know exactly or answer that question in a one size fits all solution. I mean, for me, it would feel, if I took on too much, it would feel, I don't like having my days feel rushed, like super rushed. You know what I mean? Like if I have gone weeks or months where I'm like, oh my God, I'm too busy or I'm crazy busy to do anything that I enjoy, I feel I messed up somewhere. Maybe that at that point, I feel like I've taken on too much. And that's when I can kind of pull back and either eliminate what I'm doing, change course, or delegate to somebody else if that can help me complete that. It's a very individualized, I think, kind of feeling. I mean, differentiating between just being uncomfortable because you're doing something differently, or realizing that you literally took on too much and can't even breathe. I mean, those are completely different things, right? One of them you have to learn to kind of adjust to, and somebody commented on it earlier, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Those are different. Those are kind of different things, right?
Perfect. Any other questions or insights that anyone would like to know in terms of picking Brian's mind and getting an insight into, how you can take elements of it and apply it to your own life and your own situation? Because I think a lot of it is applicable. Dan looks deep in thought as well.
I just love the way that you've challenged paradigm. It reminded me a lot of when I read 4 Hour Workweek about 10, 12 years ago. And
yeah,
Tim Ferriss was working and he's like, well, why does it have to be this way, and challenge that paradigm? And I see a lot of profound similarities between that and what you've done.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it definitely takes some time to kind of get over that hump, because you have a lot of people that are going to tell you that, like, they're going to question what you're doing. I mean, even when I left my job, your parents, who were your biggest influence as kids, like, they're like, what are you doing? How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? It's like, and if you're not confident, don't have a plan, and the more you get that from other people in your circle, the more you might be willing to be like, oh shit, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing this the right way? And a lot of times it's people that you realize have never kind of stepped off the path. Right. And maybe quite frankly, are a little afraid to do that. And I think that's why by having that wellness habit instilled in you and that confidence that can help build will allow you to kind of say, yeah, I think I'll be okay. I can figure this out, but thanks. I appreciate that.
I think that question of asking why, like, why do I need to have a business built this way? Why do I need to have a job that's built this way? Why do I need, to even own a property or raise my family this way? Get down to that deepest why and see if it actually serves you, or it's something that you've just kind of hopped onto the bandwagon of realizing it. Because it's
a great point, Garrett. So it's exactly kind of the questioning that I went through when I kept wanting to kind of upgrade my apartment. I mentioned I was living in a 2-bedroom. I had a roommate. It was super cheap, and I only spent time to sleep there. So it didn't make sense for me to have this massive apartment where I was spending 50, 60. I mean, I have friends that even spent 70% of their income on their housing. It just didn't make sense to me at that time. So as I began questioning why and digging deeper, why, you can ask why as many times, like ad infinitum, like just keep asking why to get to that certain reason why. And I figured a lot of it out was because it was like, yeah, because all my friends are doing it. And I want people to see that I'm successful. Like, I didn't care about that. Like, I want to validate my own kind of what I've done with my nice apartment. It just didn't matter to me. And I got to that reason and every time I did the homework to see if I wanted to buy an apartment, I came back to that same reason. It was like, why am I doing this? It just doesn't make any sense.
Perfect.
It's a great point.
Brian, we're gonna wrap up in just a minute. Any final points, or if anyone has any final questions, you've got 60 seconds or less to answer it. But Brian, any final thoughts to kind of wrap it up and tie a nice bow in our year?
I would encourage everyone to just question everything. Question what you're doing. Question why you're doing it. Make sure you're doing it because you want to do it, or because it's necessary for your business. And if it's necessary for your business, is it a business that you want to be doing? And just make sure you are questioning everything that you were doing, because you have one shot at this. And why spend so much of your time doing something that you don't want to do? Make sure you question everything. That would be my bow in all of this. Kind of wrap it up in that way.
That's a really nice point of execution. I think that's a really solid execution to keep us on our individual paths heading into the new year, in terms of not just accepting it because it's accepted. Christy says, lots of my family and friends have said I'm crazy to do what I'm doing, but I know what I want and I have the drive to execute it. Now I'm in the process of building and creating my studio. Everyone has changed their minds and now congratulating me on my bold maneuver. I'm creating all by myself. Thank you, team. Thanks, Brian. I question everything.
I love it. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that.
Yeah, and it's not even because they want to hold you back. They're just, the only person they know how to support is who you were. And you're stepping into more of yourself, and you're showing them more of what you can do. And they'll still be there to support you. But yeah, sometimes people hold us back because they're just worried about us, right? And they've just helped us get to that level, and they just don't want to see you hurt. And that's
agree.
Fantastic though, Christy. I love that. That's a great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Christy. That's awesome. Congratulations to you too.
Folks, give a round of applause for Brian.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Guys, feel free to reach out at any time. Instagram is Simple Man Guide. Email is Brian@SimpleManGuide. Reach out at any time. Happy to chat or answer any questions, or hear what you're doing. I'm interested to hear what you're doing. So feel free to reach out.
I want to personally thank you for getting up at 4 a.m. Did you end up staying the whole night? Because you're gonna stay up the whole night instead of just getting up early. Have you...
I probably will. I'll try and stay up. I was telling my girlfriend last night I'd probably get tired around 7 or 8 a.m. and go back to sleep, but we'll see. We'll see. I have no idea. Thank you so much for having me, man. This was great. Hope you guys enjoyed your weekend.
Thank you.